Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park, New Jersey, the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation on Shemet. Joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler at the Solomon Schechter Day School of Long Island and Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanofsky on Sheikh Chesed in New York City. We're recording this on the 103rd day of the war, 103 days that the hostages are held in Gaza. We pray for them. We pray that they be released speedily and returned to their families. Lechek mishpichotechem. That's the Mishaberach that we say every Shabbat. It's very powerful image, and of course, the observance of 100 days over the last couple of days, many moving moments there, and of course, our thoughts are with them, and we pray for their release. We pray that the soldiers on the IDF will come home safely as soon as possible. We are reading Parashat Bo this week. Parashat Bo. It's an interesting parsha. I want to turn to you, Barry, for a second. It's like we're starting a different kind of movement here. It's a different parsha, and what are some identifying features of this parsha that speak to you or strike you?
So I guess, we have the end of the plagues, but there's a kind of before and after. So the 10th plague is described, and then we have a lengthy discussion in chapter 12 of Pesach, what the rabbis refer to as Pesach Mitzrayim and Pesach Dorot, how Pesach would be observed in Egypt, and then later how it would be observed by future generations. And then we come back to the narrative after a brief discourse about the tefillin. And there's a lot of setups, I guess we would say, literary setups in Exodus. So when we get later in the book, we'll have the preparation to build the Mishkan and the actual building of the Mishkan separated by the incident of the golden calf. And I think it leads us to think about the role of storytelling in shaping our national narrative. That the story is really the key. And I was thinking a little bit earlier, there's a kind of co-optation because Pesach, as it's described in our Parsha, is originally a home ritual. And it's wherever you live, that's where you make your Korban Pesach and have your meal. And then it becomes a temple ritual. But after the destruction of the temple, with the introduction of the Seder, it becomes a home ritual once again, because I think what is the most important part of Pesach is the story and how we participate year after year, generation after generation in our great national saga of redemption.
It's so interesting because, when you think about the Passover experience in the temple, I'm not sure that the story was the major element as much as the act of sacrifice that everybody had to come and do this. And did they do this with a kind of Seder? They did the sacrifice, and they may have had a proto Seder. I mean, even the evidence in the Haggadah is Zecher Lemikdash. Well, Hillel eats the.
Well, this is the one piece, but
Right.
but the even in the temple piece, there's a little there in Exodus 12 here, and including when describing the thing. I guess this is in Devarim. It says, "In the morning you will leave and go back to your tents."
That's the bar.
Which suggests that they did something. They stayed up all night. But that's Devarim. But I think that the symbolic power of the description here in 12 of painting the blood, ve'amartem zevach pesach u'ladunai, and you shall say, this is the offering. It really reinforces that this is a demonstrative ritual that is supposed to bring something into their heads and bring something into their hearts. So whether it's story in the way that we think of like national saga or epic poetry or whatever, it is an absorption of a covenantal message. It's not just lunch, it's not just dinner, it's not just shawarma, it's shawarma plus important message.
Well, Birkat Hamazon. But what I
Yeah.
would add is that in the temple, apparently they would have the meal, they gather for the picture, and then they go home.
So I want to just add one little footnote here, which is that an often overlooked little phrase here is that so Moshe is giving these instructions to the people. He's telling them exactly what to do. Take a lamb on the 10th day of the month and hold on to it and keep it there, and then prepare it in the way that we all know, slaughter it, put the blood on the doorpost, etc., etc. And it's a whole way of preparing the ritual. Roasted the lamb, you were to eat the meal, with matzot umarim, and then the last thing that happens is the people receive this instruction, vayikod ha'am vayishtachu. They bow down, they honor the instructions. Now I'm pointing this out because we had last week, this wonderful, speech that Moses gives where the people can't hear them. Right? They're so downtrodden and overworked, they don't even bother to listen. But previously, when Moshe came and told the people that they were going to be rescued, they have the same reaction. Vaikoda am vaishtachu. So here, there is a sense that they're ready. They're honoring the commandment, and they're receiving the commandment by worshiping, or by not by worshiping, by showing an act of reverence. Okay, so let's go right into then chapter 12, verse 29, because I mean it reads such a beautiful story. It's a great moment of storytelling. Vayehi b'chatzi halayla. It was in the middle of the night. Okay, and we're not saying in the middle of the night. It's not that. It's in the middle of the night. Da 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 da. Vayehi b'chatzi halayla. Va'Adonai hika chol bechor be'eretz Yisrael. It gets tzmarmoret, goose flesh. Just saying this, God smote all of the firstborn of the land of Egypt. Mi bechor paro hayoshev al kiso, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who is sitting on his throne. Ad bechor hashvi, even the firstborn in captivity. Asher bevet habor. Bechor Bema, even those who were in jail, and also firstborn of the animals. And so it's a moment of terror, a moment of great terror. And
I have to say that just
yeah, go ahead.
On the level of, with all due reverence here, V'chol b'chor behema is kind of like a clunk note at the end of that beautiful sentence. And so it was in the middle of the night. I can't say it with the great power of the Elliott
No,
Malamud
no, no,
voice.
no,
It's basic idea. Kol ha-bechor be'eretz Mitzrayim, mi bechor paro hayoshev al kiso, ad bechor hashevi, asher beveit habor. The rhythm, the evenness of the number of syllables, like this actually scans as poetry. And then
Yes,
somebody goes, and you know what? The cows too. Like,
Well, I think this ties up a little bit with chapter 13, which calls for the redemption of the firstborn of the cattle.
sure.
And it's a sign that God is all consuming, that his dominion does not just extend to human beings, but to their livestock as well.
I think we have very little appreciation of the role of the firstborn in antiquity, and that the firstborn was the prerogative of the deity, and the firstborn was the prerogative of Pharaoh. Here, we kind of worked some of that out in the book of Breshit, and here God is asserting himself to take what is that which makes Pharaoh away from him. All of the support that he gets, Pharaoh is entitled to every firstborn as the deity of Egypt, and by taking them out of the picture completely in such terror and destruction, he removes all power away from Pharaoh at the same time.
I would say that all of that. I mean, I'm I'm really kind of just complaining about the disruption of the poetic cadence of the
Yes.
pasuk,
Okay.
and also though, I mean, okay, yes, in fact the story of the Makot, the plagues, was not only in the human realm; it was against the agricultural realm, it was against the animal realm too. So yeah, I got that, and everything that you're saying does make sense macro, but I think that the thing that you're saying, about undermining all sense of power, majesty, preeminence that is the Paro figure, could have been accomplished without striking down the cattle. But I think that you are right, whichever one of you guys said this, that here in this passage in the Torah, in 13, we are going to talk about the redemption of
First, that's Barry, yeah.
firstborn animals. And so these v'chol b'chor behema, which is the words that I'm saying I think are clunky, they do make a connection between what is going to also be a new ritual mitzvah.
Let me ask you what you think then of the next verse, which is Vayakom Paro Laila. He gets up in the middle of the night. Hu v'chol avadav v'chol Mitzrayim. Vayiti tzaka gedola b'Mitzrayim. There's a great scream in Egypt. He ain't by the sher ain't shamed, because there's no house in which there is no death. That is, death is visited every single household. I want to just start with Vayakom Paro Laila. That is to say, it in the storytelling of this, there's a split screen, right? That what is happening in the Israelite world is that they are slaughtering their animals. They've painted the doorposts. They're sitting and waiting to roast the fire, the animal over the fire. They're preparing to. They're dressed up, and Pharaoh's asleep. Okay, and the other screen is Pharaoh's asleep. What it suggests is that he is detached from that whole story, and he is asleep. And it's not that he's pretending not to know anything. He is decidedly detached from their drama, and then he's woken up in the middle of the night, uh, and being told that you're under attack, basically.
Well, I think that there is perhaps something else going on here, because there's an irony here that the mashchit, the destroyer that comes, is described in the Torah as a physical presence. And when death enters each of these houses, it's a physical presence. And it will stir people who are sleeping because they can feel it. Right? It's not just that they're sleeping through it, is that something has altered their reality of their home, and they know that something terrible has just happened.
Well, they're screaming. Vatihi tzaka gedola b'Mitzrayim. There's a great scream.
Right, but what I would suggest is that what wakes Pharaoh is not the scream, but the presence of death in his house.
So
And the irony is, of course, is that death is the absence of life, which announces itself with the presence. It's sort of the counterpart to God's kavod.
So this is a real, this is a really scary movie, right? Like it's not just the absence of life, like the palpable presence of death. We always, by the way, tell the story that Pharaoh is a firstborn, and we have this, even in the commentaries. We were talking earlier about the passage in which Pharaoh asked Moshe for a blessing, like, before we started recording.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, coming up. And Rashi says, I'm a firstborn and I need some protection here. And yet that sort of doesn't work on the plot level, because, I mean, either firstborn means every single peter rechem, the thing that opens every womb, human or animal, and it's just ontologically true. It's part of their being, and the mashchit comes and they die, in which case Pharaoh should have died. Or maybe it means that there's a firstbornness that maybe lapses upon reaching adulthood or something like that. And this is all children who are being killed, which, by the way, as we are living in through, terrible events and thinking about children who are victims of war going on. It's just agonizing to think that.
Right. What I would say, Jeremy, is that what makes Pharaoh not the firstborn is that his father is dead already. That the firstborn that is killed is a firstborn who has a living father.
Okay, well, that would make sense then. At some level, it's not that when you reach adulthood, it's when you become the not the oldest generation. There could be other generations, but if your own parent dies, then you have to be that makes a bechor, a firstborn of a living person.
Yes, and that's what the tragedy is here, is because everyone is bearing a child.
You have to have somebody who loves you as a firstborn child.
Right.
So
You have to have a parent bury you in order to make it a plague.
if Pharaoh is indeed a firstborn himself and he is spared, then there's an amnesty here for the king. I'm thinking of this the beautiful story where King Saul is matched up against Amalek and spares Agag. And you know the way that we commonly teach that story is that he has a bit of Rahmanis on a
Well,
fellow
professional
king.
courtesy.
It's a professional courtesy. Look, the whole point of the Exodus, at least as it was stated, is Laman Teda, so that you will know, right? God is doing all of these plagues on Egypt so that you will know. And there has to be a moment where Pharaoh is alive to recognize and to know that he's just a human being. That
Right,
God,
but it also, the death of his son breaks his dynastic chain as well,
indeed.
because he cannot bequeath the kingdom to his firstborn.
But it never tells us anything. It never gives us any humanity to Pharaoh that he reacts to the death of his own firstborn, right? But it does say here, "Mibichor paro hayoshev al kiso," right? So the narrator is very skillful here. The narrator is saying that firstborn has been killed. So therefore, the loss would be incurred by Pharaoh, and you would expect, a human reaction, a human cry at the death of his firstborn child. And you don't have that here.
That's actually great observation. And by the way, I think that pasuk instantiates Barry's point. It's not the first about the firstborn means somebody who has a parent who would mourn for a firstborn. It's the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on the throne and the firstborn of the captive. It's not like a statement about one's ontological birth order or something like that. It's the in the very tightly packed verse, disrupted by the clause at the end, that very tightly packed verse, you have that every single household has a loss. Ein bayit asher ein shamet. There's no household, and bayit here doesn't mean the structure, it means the household. There's no clan that is not going to have to bury somebody.
It doesn't tell us how they are killed, how they meet their end,
Well,
and
it says earlier that the mashchit will come and visit them.
and visit them. So does he slaughter them? Does he
Is it
asphyxiate
the
them?
Dementors? It's like the Dementors in Harry Potter. That's what I'm imagining. There's some malevolent soul-sucking force.
He gives them the Vulcan,
I think in the movie it's green.
All right. So then,
which movie?
Prince of Egypt.
Prince of Egypt. That's a much better than Cecil B. DeMille.
Vayikra leMoshe uLaharon Laila. He calls them. They're in the middle of the Korban Pesach, and he calls them.
For some people.
For some people, I'm not going to my own interpretation here. You've heard it all from me. I don't think they got to eat it. It was kumutsu mitochami. He says, "Get out of here." Gamatem gamanei Israel l'chu ivdu et Adonai kedaberchem. Go worship God. That's what you wanted to do. Go. Take everything. Gam tzоnchem. Take your sheep. Gam bikarchem. Take your cattle. Kichu asher dibartem. Take everything that you said you would. Valechu. Move. Uverachtem gam oti. And bless me. Okay, now I'm giving a plain reading here. Bless me, but it does seem odd. So Barry, I want you to give us your reading of this, and then Jeremy and I will object to it.
Okay. So in the book of Job, Mrs. Job at one point, actually at 2 points, says to her husband that you should curse God and die. That's the responsible moral position in the wake of the calamities that have been inflicted on Job. But the verb that's used to mean curse is berach, to bless or to praise. And it occurred to me while I was reading this that to think that Pharaoh is asking for a blessing after dispatching the entire Israelite population and property seemed off to me. And so it occurs to me that maybe what it really is the euphemistic language that we see in the book of Job, and that he's recognizing now, with all the firstborn in Egypt dead, that he's actually been cursed, and that's why he's sending them off.
So your grammar of that would be go worship God, da, 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 as you said, take everything, as you have cursed me.
Yeah, now you have cursed me.
Now, okay.
Now you have cursed me.
All right. So I wanna go with the meaning of berachtem, that its intention is I want something from you. I want a parting blessing from you. And here I want to put the layer of grace on this, that they've had this conflict for 10 plagues now, where Pharaoh has not given any respect to Moshe and denied on almost every occasion. There are a couple of reversals there, whatever. We don't have to go into it, but now that there's parting, there's a need of a kind of etiquette, the etiquette of equalization, where the vanquished turns to the victor and says, "I need some grace from you. I need a gift from you. I need some way," because what they're really trying to communicate, what Pharaoh's trying to communicate is, I want to be equalized again to you. And I use the analogy of at the end of the Stanley Cup, the winning team and the losing team, line up in the middle of the arena, in the middle of the ice, and they shake hands with each other. And the game would not be complete without that. It's a moment of grace and a moment that equalizes and shows respect. And of course, in the course of shaking their hands, they all hug each other, respect each other, etc. And we have several examples of that. We talked about the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg, where the blue and the gray side, the North and the South, they reenact Pickett's charge, and instead of killing each other 75 years, these are 90-year-old men who embrace each other. It's very, very moving. And there are other examples of that. And so what I want to read in here is that Pharaoh is soliciting Moses for this grace. And of course, there's a sense of revulsion. I have a sense of revulsion at this because he has been so cruel.
So what you're suggesting, I think, Elliot, is that this is the one place where Pharaoh comes off as a human being.
Indeed, yes.
But where I might quibble with you is that going back to the king of Amalek, Agag, there is no similar ceremony there. We could say that Saul tried to equalize things with his saving the king. But that king was destined to die. And it may be that Pharaoh doesn't really get a chance to become an equal, because that's the whole point of the story, is that he always thought he was on a higher plane than he actually was.
Yeah.
I feel like we get caught up on the word of equalizing. Like when you read about, like, in psychological literature and stuff, which I read around the high holidays, what is the dynamic of apology? If somebody has hurt you, you apologize, and that restores. You have diminished the person you have hurt. If you apologize, you enable the person to sort of rehabilitate a little bit. Pharaoh is obviously in the wrong here, and when he says berachtem gam oti, which I also think means bless me, not curse me, and grammatically I think it works better that way, as well as semantically works better. I think I don't know about the equalizing is the key thing, but I do think that he's in need of help. And the scene that we're talking about here, Moses and the Israelites are headed for an act of worship. They have said, we want to go serve God, we want to celebrate God, we want to take, why can't you do it in Egypt? Well, we're going to sacrifice a lot of animals. You guys worship these animals, it won't go well. We're going to go out and worship, and we're going to meet the master of the world. And Pharaoh, who has been just, he entered a conflict he could not win. He started off by saying, I don't know, who is this God? I don't know. I've never heard of him. And I'm not going to send Bnei Israel out. Okay, he's been completely and utterly trampled. And now, in an act of, I agree with what you said, Barry, about this is maybe not the very only, because at a certain point in the plagues, he says, I'm wrong. But now at the final time, he says, I'm wrong, and I am not in control, and I need help. And so we, the good guys in the story, you can transpose it to contemporary things, about Hamas. You can think about the Nazis. You can think about whoever. If one of your mortal enemies came to you and said, "Listen, now I'm in terrible straits. I need help," I do find it a little hard to summon up the beneficent human response. But I think that that's what Pharaoh is asking. God's going to take your call. My kingdom has been destroyed. My children are dead. We have no more agriculture. We got nothing. Just please help us a little bit. And whether, this story is going to go on one more parsha in which Pharaoh is going to say to himself, oh, wait a minute, I got to try to chase him down one more time. And that's going to be the final. But at this point, it seems like it's the end. And this guy who showed zero vulnerability, showed tremendous akshanut, tremendous stubbornness, at least for this one instance, says, I'm vulnerable and I need some help.
And so what's interesting is that there's silence afterwards. There's no response to this. And Moses doesn't respond, Aaron doesn't respond. And I think there's a takeaway there, which is I can't give you what you need here. Or at least the text is silent and allowing us to interpret, the possibility that saying, for the cruelty that you've inflicted on us, the slavery, and for the tyranny that you have demonstrated, and your absolute power, there is no forgiveness. I can't forgive you. Many Hebrew children are lying at the bottom of the Nile because of you. I can't bring myself to that. And I think that we do have to take that into consideration. Everybody's talking about the day after. What do you do the day after? And I mean, far be it for any of us to really offer any kind of thing. But here you'll have a population, and people who aided, abetted, and also people who perpetrated some of the greatest crimes against Jews in the last 80 years. And what do you do with that? How do it's not that you can let everyone go. I mean, part of the internal conversation now in Israel is, well, what if it was prisoners for hostages, and the sense of I don't know, rupture. But we're moving beyond what we wanted to talk about here, which is, so we get into the final statements of how this is going to be commemorated and how people are going to remember this. And I want to go back, Jeremy, to the idea of ritual functioning as a way to tell a story. And maybe we can conclude with that idea because, the ritual of Passover is so powerful. I mean, we're sitting here in January and read these parshas, and I have a little bit of tongue in cheek when we read it, because it's basically saying, you got to get ready for Pesach now. You got to get ready for Passover now. Okay. But it is the most powerful ritual, I think, that's observed in the Jewish home through the course of the year. It is to narrate a story, and it's a set of rituals. And just talk about that for a second. Ritual functions as a way to tell a story, and how that idea, ritual, telling a story, can be, unlock a lot of the way that we understand rituals. Take, for example, life cycle rituals. Take, for example, any of the prayer rituals, or any of the other. I mean, this is the idea they want to go with.
Yeah, well, both in 12 and then in 13, the Bible in a way which it also come up in Deuteronomy as well, and is more characteristic of the language of Deuteronomy is, our readers and listeners will perhaps our viewers and listeners perhaps know that Deuteronomy is a very different sort of book than the rest of the Torah, and its emphasis is on teaching, listening, studying. It's like Devarim invents this religion that we have. It primarily happens in the head and heart. But here in Shemot in 12 and 13, you get some of that Deuteronomy vibe because your children are going to ask you, and you're going to recite something, and that is going to keep this sense of covenantal commitment. We are part of this people. This is how we know we are together. The word blood in Hebrew is just a plural word, like mayim, damim. Water is a plural word, and blood is a plural word. And in Ezekiel, there's this passage which will be familiar to those who know the traditional Haggadah or the Brit Milah ritual. Va'omar lach b'damayech chayi, va'omar lach b'damayech chayi, this image of this found baby, and God who finds the baby says, in your bloods live. What are the bloods? Dam Pesach v'dam Brit, the blood of the Passover sacrifice smeared on the walls, and the blood of the covenantal ritual of Brit Milah. This is not just a religion of ideas. It's not just a religion of the Rambam. Flesh and blood. And so in these rituals, what you eat together, and for us, who get animal products from a store and wrapped in plastic, no, they killed the animal together. There was actual physical touching of the blood. The blood was marked on the house. We understand that, as Barry said, to be purely Pesach Mitzrayim and not Pesach Dorot, something that happened one and only one time and not throughout history. But that kind of doesn't make a ton of sense if you just read Exodus 12. It seems like on all it seems like at some point it was part of the ritual, and this sense of we have been crushed and we were liberated. This is how you know you're a Jew. I'm thinking about this because we're always going to have the coincidence, by the way, of Martin Luther King holiday, as happened this week, yesterday, as this is Tuesday, we're recording this, and these slavery in Egypt parshiot, like the degree to which, in a Black American religious life, you're part of this people because you have suffered and because you're on this road towards liberation, and things are not exactly the same for us, us, this part of the house of Israel, but I think we can really get how that works.
Yeah. Darry, you have any ideas, comments, just in terms of, we're telling a story, and the fact that the Torah says we anticipate that you're going to ask questions.
Well, I think that in and of itself demands an explanation, because in the language of the Torah, the child will see the parent, the father in the Torah, do something that doesn't make sense to him. And they'll say in one version or another, Mazo, what is this? And the parent will respond, that with a strong hand, God took me out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. And what will happen in the course of time is the son who says, Mazo, what is this? Is going to become the parent who says, God took me out of the land of Egypt, even though it's not quite true, unless the father now can internalize the story and make something that happened to his father his own. And there's a powerful lesson here about redemption in the Bible, that redemption requires God, that we cannot get to where we're supposed to go without the guiding help and hand of the Almighty.
And
Playing on this, perhaps, is chapter 13, which is the concluding part of the Parsha, the first 16 verses, which has the other two passages that are probably less familiar to most of us, that are in the Tefillin. And they mention the Tefillin, the Totafot, and tefillin is also a sign of the exodus from Egypt, only it's worn daily because we need a constant reminder, such as tefillin, and that always prompts questions, especially if you ever put them on in front of people who've never seen them before.
Right.
And the annual reminder, which is the holiday of Pesach.
Yeah.
And the two work together because this theme is what I think our lives, both spiritual and material, depend upon.
Indeed. Well, that's a good place to bring this to a conclusion. And thinking about this parsha, really, it's the pivotal moment. It's Yetziat Mitzrayim. They are released from Egypt, and it's the epoch-changing, world-changing, people-changing event, the redemption of our people. We pray for the redemption of our hostages, captives, once again, and want to thank you for watching, for listening. We're so honored that you bring us into your lives in this Torah way. Love to hear what you have to say. Your comments, please write. If you're inclined to, you can write on Barry Chesler's Facebook page. You can write on Anshe Chesed Facebook page or on the YouTube channel. And in the meantime, we want to thank you and wish you all a good Shabbat. And we'll see you next week on the next edition of Parsha Talk.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.